Rabbi Raphael of Barshad once visited the city of Kamenka. One day, the daughter of the local Rebbe, the Rebbe of Kamenka, went to see the visiting tzaddik while her father wasn't home, hoping to get a blessing from him for children, since she was barren. The tzaddik told her, if you want to have children, make sure to be happy. When her father got home, she told him what the tzaddik had told her, and he explained, the tzaddik had good evidence for what he told you. In the Torah we find, Vatitzchak Sarah, and Sarah laughed. In the prophets we find, Roni Akara lo Yolada, rejoice barren woman. And in the scriptures we find, the mother of children rejoices, Ema benim smecha. So the daughter of the Kamenka Rebbe asked her father, if Sarah laughed as a skoola, meaning a folk remedy, for her to have children, why was she scolded? Her father answered, you should do a skoola only if it was suggested by a tzaddik, but in Sarah's case, in which Hashem himself promised that she would give birth, it was not appropriate. I'd like to address this last point because there are those who question this assumption and claim that Hashem did not explicitly promise Sarah that she would give birth, but he rather promised it to AVraham. Sarah, on the other hand, heard the promise only from the angels. Let me try to put things in order. In the previous Parsha, the end of Parsha Lech Lecha, Hashem turns to Avraham, and along with changing his name from Avram to Avraham and Sarai to Sarah, he also changed their destiny, their mazel, as it is written in Rashi, Avram will not have a child, but Avraham will. Sarai will not give birth, but Sarah will give birth. Then Hashem told Avraham that he would have a son from Sarah, and this happened a few years after the birth of Ishmael. Interestingly, even when Hashem told Avraham about the promised birth of his son, apparently Avraham laughed at this news, like it says in Parshat Lech Lecha, and Avraham fell on his face and laughed and pondered to himself, shall I, Avraham, have a child at the age of 100, and would Sarah give birth at the age of 90? Yet we do not hear that Hashem rebuked him for his alleged lack of faith. In this Parsha Vayera, it says that when Sarah heard the news, Sarah laughed and said, after I have withered, will I be able to give birth again? Also, my master is old. For this statement, Sarah was reprimanded, in contrast to Avraham, who said something very similar. Yet he was not rebuked. In both cases, they were only thoughts that they kept to themselves. They didn't say it out loud. But in Sarah's case, the Torah writes, and Hashem said to Avraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I give birth at my old age? So why wasn't Avraham asked about this in regarding to his own thoughts that were very similar to those of Sarah? Immediately after Hashem told Avraham that he would have another son, Avraham responded, I wish Ishmael would live before you, hoping that he, Ishmael, would be God-fearing and walk in the steps of Avraham. May Ishmael live before you, he said. Based on this, we conclude that Avraham must have believed in Hashem's promise of another son. It's as if to say to Hashem, thank you really for this other son you intend to give me in a miraculous way, but I'd suffice if Ishmael improves his behavior and becomes worthy to continue my legacy. In Sarah's case, however, we do not find any response or indication that would prove that she did not question the promise of a child. On the contrary, she supposedly felt that her thoughts were inappropriate since she denied laughing and mocking the chance of having a child at her old age. Along with the reasoning that he would suffice with Ishmael, which proved that he believed that Hashem could actually grant him another child, it's still not entirely clear why Avraham was not criticized for what he thought in his heart, which seemingly indicated that he at least wondered how he would have a child at the age of 100, which was a reaction very similar to that of Sarah's. Rashi, according to Onkelos, remarks that Avraham laughed out of joy and faith, not out of disbelief as Sarah did. Therefore Sarah was reprimanded and not Avraham. Consequently, another question comes to mind. If we assume that Avraham was not scolded since he actually believed Hashem could give him a child at his advanced age, the obvious question that arises is, why Sarah, who was highly spiritual and even considered a prophetess, had doubts about her physical condition that may have prevented her from giving birth at that age? We ought to remember that while Sarah was in Paro's palace, Avraham didn't need to worry about her well-being since she was accompanied by an angel who guarded her. Also, Hashem instructs Avraham later on, Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her voice. And an entire parsha is named after Sarah, Chaya Sarah. And we see that both Paro and Avimelech were afflicted from heaven when they dared to approach her. Why then was she perceived as lacking in the belief that she would have a son at her advanced age? And also, why did she deny that she didn't laugh when the Torah testified that she actually did laugh in her heart? It sounds strange that such a thing would happen to such a spiritual and saintly woman. A question also arises from another direction. Rashi mentions that Hashem made sure to be careful about his style of speaking to AVraham when he reported to him that Sarah had said that she was old, when in fact she had said, "My Lord is old," meaning AVraham is old, which is another reason that she allegedly doubted the possibility of them having a child at that stage in their life. In any case, Hashem diverted from her actual thoughts and claimed instead to AVraham that she said she was old instead of saying that she said he was old, in order to promote peace in their relationship. But if that's the case, why did Hashem even bother to ask AVraham why did Sarah laugh? Why didn't he address Sarah about this? After all, the rebuke she received didn't change the outcome. Sarah still gave birth, and paradoxically, when she gave birth, what did she do? The first thing she did was laugh. The Torah makes it a point to mention that she reacted in the same manner that she did when she was told she would have a child, and she had doubts about it. The word laughter is mentioned also when she gave birth, at a time when we have no doubt that she was genuinely happy, while when she was informed about the fact that she'd have a child, the word laughter that described her reaction took on a meaning of wonder and disbelief. We may ask, why did Hashem ask AVraham, why did Sarah laugh? After all, this in itself may provoke a lack of domestic peace, which we mentioned earlier that Hashem tried to prevent when he changed Sarah's word. She said, "My master is old," and yet Hashem told AVraham that Sarah said that she was old. Wouldn't it have been preferable to omit this question altogether? This may have embarrassed AVraham and caused friction between the two of them, as evident when she tried to clear herself by denying the fact that she laughed at all. And mostly, since Torah aims to teach us life lessons, what does this incident teach us in a way we could implement the lessons in our daily life? When AVraham sat at the entrance of the tent, as told in the beginning of the Parsha, 3 guests had arrived, and AVraham greeted them and hosted them with his well-known outstanding hospitality, notwithstanding he was still in great pain due to the bris he had underwent a few days earlier. Without studying the commentaries, we wouldn't have known that they were angels, and in general the modest Sarah was in the tent, and their words were also addressed to AVraham when they said, "I will return to you again in a year's time, and behold a son for Sarah your wife." And the verse continues, "And Sarah heard this at the entrance of the tent, and he followed him." After which the Torah gives us the following information. "And AVraham and Sarah came in days," meaning they were becoming old, "and Sarah was incapable at that time to give birth." Since Rashi follows interpretation claiming that Sarah had laughed out of doubt, it's interesting to note that Rashi's explanation that Sarah became impure as young women would on a monthly basis. This may cast a doubt on the fact that she didn't believe that she could conceive a child. She had a direct proof that she was resuming her youthful capacity to become pregnant. Her physical condition then defiled her, and the dough she was kneading had also become impure because of this. This detail questions further Sarah's lack of trust in the promise of a child that she would bear. Didn't she have living proof that the promise was beginning to materialize? Why then did she laugh in disbelief? But a single unexpected sign can occur in older women without any connection to menstruation or pregnancy, meaning that Sarah may not have seen it as proof that she could actually have a child. Actually, Sarah also knew that the promise of sons to AVraham had already been fulfilled through Ishmael, and therefore she wasn't sure that she would give birth, despite the fact that after Ishmael was born, Hashem promised AVraham another son. But did Sarah know about this? Not necessarily. There are those who explain that what Hashem promised AVraham at the end of the previous Parsha, Lech Lecha, was not necessarily told to Sarah, because when Hashem gives a prophecy to an individual, he is not supposed to tell it to anyone else unless Hashem explicitly tells him to do so. Therefore, according to this, it's possible that Sarah didn't even know about the promise to AVraham about another son. On the other hand, Hashem chose to send the message of the birth of the son to Sarah through angels, while he himself was the one who gave the news to Avraham. Therefore, it's explained that if Hashem had told Sarah directly that she would give birth to a son, she would have believed it with her whole heart and with no doubt. However, since as far as Sarah was concerned, she didn't know that the people who came to visit were angels, and perhaps even Avram didn't know they were angels. In fact, he gave them a meal as he would to any other human visitor, so she doubted their words. She thought that these were merely humans who, in return for a gourmet meal in the desert and amazing hospitality, they offered her a kind blessing, but she questioned the reliability of their promise. So immediately after Sarah's laughter, that wasn't a laugh out loud that we are used to these days, but actually a doubt in her heart, Hashem turns to Avraham with the argument of why Sarah laughed. And as mentioned, why didn't Hashem address Sarah directly about this? So there are those who explain that in turning to Avraham, Avraham also received some of the rebuke for his laughter mentioned in the previous Parsha, but this is expressed in Sarah's words. How does it work? A man and his wife, as explained in Parshat Bereshit, become one flesh, a single unit, while each one of them makes a contribution to the relationship. Avraham and Sarah were like wisdom and understanding. In Hasidus, it's explained that wisdom, chokhmah, has the attribute of submissiveness, when one belittles oneself in the face of divine substance that is revealed to him. Therefore, Avraham's apparent lack of trust from the previous Parsha is not really significant, as I explained, that he actually believed in Hashem's promise, and as is proven by what he said to Hashem about Ishmael. But the very fact that he was amazed at Hashem's ability to give him a son from the same woman with whom he lived for so many years without the capacity of conceiving made him nonetheless wonder. But he probably wondered why he deserved such extraordinary consideration. Therefore, it's related that he fell on his face and laughed. And as we explained, what stood out in his reaction was the joy, whereas Sarah represents Bina, understanding, which elaborates on the points of the wisdom and expands it with logical explanations and reasoning. Therefore, it's actually Sarah who reflects the understanding, intellect, and logic that ordinarily deals with doubts and asks more questions. Although we may have been accustomed to regarding understanding and intellect as the most lofty measure of a person's mind, according to Hasidus, it is actually the wisdom, the chokhmah, the first instance of conception of a higher thought prior to its elaboration, that has this submissiveness to the above, which is actually more praiseworthy than understanding and elaboration, carried out by Bina, wisdom, which deals with elaboration. This explains why Hashem approaches Avraham in particular to give him this message about Sarah. Avraham had a higher connection to the divine, and because of this blind belief that stands above human intellect, he was, so to speak, told off in a subtle way for refraining to share this lofty experience and handing it down to Sarah, referring to the level of understanding, in a way that would trigger her belief in the above. Did Hashem instruct Avraham explicitly to tell Sarah that they would have a child together? Probably not. As we see, this message was sent to her by one of the angels. And in regard to her answer, Sarah denying that she laughed because she feared, the Or HaChaim explains that Sarah did indeed make a mistake in relating to the matter intellectually, with the conclusion that it was naturally impossible for her to give birth. But she immediately caught herself and reignited her fear of Hashem that penetrated her consciousness and from there into her heart. And so, when she denies the fact that she disbelieved, it was as if to say, it's not really me who doubted it, it's just an external aspect of me, but deep down I believe that nothing should be doubted about Hashem the Almighty. A more relatable explanation about this can be realized if we relate to Avraham and Sarah as representing the soul and the body. And if anyone argues about the validity of this explanation due to modern trends regarding the role of genders, it's not my personal interpretation, it's found widely in the teachings of the rabbis. So if Avraham represents the soul, it's clear that the type of laughter indicating misbelief and the so-called lack of faith are not felt by the soul, and definitely not dominant in the soul that is divine, and therefore laughter from Abraham's point of view is more a matter of wonder and joy that he was promised a son at such an age. Sarah, on the other hand, who represents the body, doubts the promise based on assumptions of the physical world and the physical reality. At such an age, you don't give birth, but as soon as she is tied back to the soul, She immediately yields to the soul's point of view and explains, "True, I'm the body, but the body is not the main factor. The soul takes priority." And then Sarah, representing the body, as it once again attaches itself to the soul, concludes, "Just as I can miraculously give birth at the age of 90, so too a woman who gives birth at the age of 20 undergoes a miracle." Why? Because the laws of nature were also established by Hashem, and whoever tells oil to ignite can tell water to ignite. And the people of Israel, Am Yisrael, from the moment of its inception, are accompanied by visible miracles throughout history. Sarah's laughter and the wonder about the laws of nature and their vulnerability expresses the history of the Jewish people that repeats itself in a cyclical manner over and over. Am Yisrael, who currently constitutes 0.2% of the world's population, endure ongoing suffering. We have been threatened with destruction throughout the ages. In Mitzrayim, in Egypt, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, in the time of Haman, during the Crusades, during the Acquisition, in the time of the Holocaust, and in many other instances. As a result of these ongoing afflictions, we may doubt our ability to survive because we are like a sheep among 70 wolves who try to swallow us. Throughout all of these oppressive eras, up to the most recent war, when we were attacked from all directions, the Holy One, blessed be He, comes along and says, "Is there anything preventing me from saving you?" Torah was not punished for her words. On the contrary, she had the merit of giving birth to Yitzchak. And this teaches us throughout the generations that even if we think in terms of worldly, down-to-earth intelligence, rationally speaking, we, the Jews, have no chance of surviving after everything plotted against us over and over again. Hashem has perpetuated His ongoing protection in the Torah, and His response to Sarah's fear, "Turn to your soul, your divine source of power, and you will be convinced that nothing stands in the way of Hashem to save the Jewish people. On the contrary, many a non-Jew marvel at the perpetual survival of the Jews throughout history." Indeed, we see that even when Hashem had informed AVraham about the planned birth of Yitzchak in Parshat Lech Lecha, Hashem told AVraham to call Yitzchak by the name Yitzchak, which means laughter. And later in Parsha Vayera, Sarah repeats the same word, tzchok, laughter, that she was apparently rebuked for. But this time she says, "When he was born, whoever hears about this will laugh at me," meaning that they will rejoice with me, because laughter can be forwarded in a positive direction. And what does this teach us in our daily life? Laughing at our fate is okay. We are like theater puppets held and directed from above, and we ought to acknowledge this and thank Hashem for the goodness and kindness He constantly bestows on us. I could have probably elaborated about the advantages of laughter and also about its disadvantage. That is, if you laugh at someone and mock him, that's pretty bad. But I want to focus on the more positive side of laughter, the type that liberates you, when you laugh with someone and not at her, or when, for example, the pureness of a cute child that makes you smile, or when you tell something funny to a person who's worried or sad to lift up their spirits. These days it's very easy. All you need to do is send someone like that a funny sticker, and when they send you back a few smiling icons, you know you did your job. And also when a person laughs at himself, naturally, it's good if it stems from positive self-awareness and not from an inferiority complex or something similar. A high official once told listeners that he was dismissed as a young man from being a waiter in a rather small restaurant. But he testified later that he became a lawyer, served for 7 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, and held quite a few other senior positions. He told people that his trick to success was to laugh at himself in public. By the way, many of those who ridiculed him as a person who devaluated himself in front of others ended up doing menial jobs and holding lower-level positions. It's told in the Gemara, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva went up to Yerushalayim. When they reached Mount Scopus, they tore their clothes. When they reached the Temple Mount, they saw a fox coming out of the Holy of Holies. They then started to cry, and Rabbi Akiva laughed. They said to Rabbi Akiva, "Why are you laughing?" And he said to them, "Why are you crying?" So they told him, "This is the holy spot about which it's written that a stranger who comes near shall be put to death, and now foxes spend their time there? Why shouldn't we cry?" He told them, "That's precisely why I'm laughing. Now that Uriah's prophecy has been fulfilled, what did Uriah say? Therefore Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Yerushalayim will become a heap of ruins, which is quoted in the book of Micha. I am positive that Zechariah's prophecy will also be fulfilled. What does he say? Then, at that time, old men and women will sit in the streets of Yerushalayim. This element of laughter at the time of destruction is expressed in practice in many communities. When on Tisha B'Av, the children happily observe the custom of throwing poppy seed pods at people in shuls and synagogues, in accordance with the style of the previous event I mentioned with Rabbi Akiva and the sages. If we return to the matter of the birth of Yitzchak, which happens later in the Parsha, after Sarah is rebuked, we once again encounter the element of laughter as she states, Hashem made me laugh. Anyone who hears about it laughs with me. And the Midrash maintains that they had a good reason to rejoice with her. Not only did she give birth to Yitzchak at an advanced age, the Midrash goes on to say they had a good reason to rejoice with her. Many women who had been barren were able to conceive. Many sick people were healed on that day. Many prayers were answered with her, and there was a lot of joy in the world. In the same vein, we look forward to the redemption when we will finally realize and experience what we say many times before the grace after meals on days Tachnun is not recited from Tehillim chapter 126. That when Hashem returns Israel to Zion, our mouths will be filled with laughter and our tongues with praise. This naturally refers to the type of laughter that is true, perpetual, and eternally positive. It's about time for this to take place. Don't you think so?